I think my first job here was sorting bolts when I was 9 or 10 years old and getting paid by the piece. So Jim and Jean Brennan started a small contracting business, and it started with, of all things, pouring concrete barn floors throughout northeastern Iowa. Mississippi River, the locks and dams were going in, and the infrastructure was being built up. They made a decision to say, this idea of focusing on waterborne construction, waterborne infrastructure is really where they wanted to go with it.
Welcome to Maritime Matters, a podcast focused on leaders in the maritime market, the people, the companies, the technologies that are making and breaking the news, helping to lead the maritime industry to a safer, more efficient, more profitable, and cleaner future. Welcome aboard. And we're very pleased to be joined today by Matt Binsfeld, the CEO of JF Brennan, to discuss this fourth generation family owned marine construction firm and some insights on its signature projects. So Matt, to start us off, can you provide a brief career background with insights on how and when you knew that yours would be a career in maritime?
Well, first off, Greg, it's great to be here with you today. Appreciate the opportunity to tell our story here at Brennan. So, looking forward to chatting with you. We're a family business. We've been in business since 1919, and when you're in a family business, it's unique in the sense that you kind of grow up around not only the business but the industry. And today, myself and my three other brothers run the Brennan organization. And when we were younger kids, starting out probably as far back as we can remember, our father was very good about getting us out onto projects around the work, just really creating a deep passion for it at a young age. And when you're a young boy coming up and you see all the big equipment and the things that you do and the projects, it's of course exciting and inspirational. And you match that and pair that with the fact that we're here in western Wisconsin. We like to call it the sunny west coast of Wisconsin, right on the Mississippi River. And we had the good fortune as kids to grow up on the river. And so it meant many days out in the backwaters and tributaries of the Mississippi doing fishing, canoeing, skiing, and all sorts of time out on the water. So I think between the inspiration of seeing the work and the personal time that we spent out on the water, it set the stage for a career and a future in the maritime industry.
So Matt, I appreciate that insight. And I got to tell you, I genuinely, I've been doing this, as I've explained, for 33 years. And I genuinely enjoy the many stories that emanate from maritime and dredging or, offshore industry, whatever, however you want to cut it, because there are so many family companies, there's so many deep ties. And in fact, New Wave Media, we're a third generation family owned business that started in New York City in 1939. Unfortunately, not my family. So, but I wanted to update our viewers with this next bit. And again, I'm certainly not looking for you to run down the full history of a 106-year-old company, but can you provide a brief history, noting what you see as a few pivotal moments along the way?
Mhm. Well, so we started in 1919. The firm was started by my great grandfather and his brother, who, interestingly enough, you had just mentioned being the fourth son. They were number four and five, and so there was no spot for them on the family farm, which was in northeast Iowa, just outside a little town, Lansing, Iowa. So Jim and Jean Brennan started a small contracting business, and it started with, of all things, pouring concrete barn floors throughout northeastern Iowa, and it was a way to keep the cattle's hooves out of the mud and whatnot. And so they started there, and eventually went to building homes and bigger, grew into the railroad area, some commercial work, and the business really began to take off. And finally, a couple decades down the road, as the Mississippi River, the locks and dams were going in, and the infrastructure was being built up, they made a decision to say, this idea of focusing on waterborne construction, waterborne infrastructure is really where they wanted to go with that business. So I would say that in the 50s, that was really one, seminal turning point in terms of business strategy and where the direction of the business went when Jim and Jean Brennan, made that decision to be water focused. From there, of course, the second generation came into the business. And I think that also should be mentioned as a seminal point, just from a family business perspective, because passing from one generation to the next generation is always, can be tricky, can be, there's a lot of nuances to it. And so that was the first time it was done and was done successfully. And I think that there was a set of expectations around how that would be done that carries on to this day. And so at that point, my grandfather and his brother-in-law took over the business and continued to grow it and even diversify it a little bit, getting into steel fabrication and other areas. But again, always focused on, at this point in time, marine construction. They ran it, up through the early 90s, but in the 80s, as my father was coming into the business, we really began to get involved more with hydraulic dredging. And then as my father took hold of the business, we further built out through acquisition a capability in the area of hydraulic dredging. So that was a seminal moment, as well as under his watch too, we started a harbor services business, which handles fleeting of barges along the Mississippi River. So those were two key points, and then fast forward into the early 2000s, that hydraulic business eventually became a environmentally focused business, which now is our environmental group. But the business continued to grow, continued to spread its wings, and ultimately, as time went on, my brothers and I matriculated back to La Crosse and followed it. I had mentioned this idea of transition and the expectations around it. We have expectations that you begin working as a yard dog in the business. We call it a yard dog, somebody who's cleaning engines and doing the dirty work and understanding the business from the base up. You go to school, get an engineering degree, you go to work for the competition, you get an MBA, and at such time your resume is attractive enough, you may get rehired. And my brothers and I all followed that path and came back here in the early 2000s after taking that journey. And since then, it's been just a great story of not only family transition of leadership of the business, but just so many good people that we've brought into this business, either through acquisitions that we've done or organically growing the business. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in the last, say, 15, 20 years, we've now taken this business to one that was really focused maybe in the upper Midwestern United States, and now essentially doing business throughout virtually every state in the United States and Canada, and really spread out geographically because of the ability to attract good people to the mission of our organization. And I think the type of work we do and the fulfillment people get from the work that we do. So it's a tremendous story, but really at the basis of that story is a story of not just a family, but a lot of families. We say we're a family business, but we're also a business of families, and just an incredible team of people that have come together to create the organization we are today.
No, that's an amazing story, and there's a lot of key points you made. And I think first and most importantly, I love the yard dog name, but I'm not gonna let my wife watch this video because that'll be my new nickname around the house and on the boat for sure, which I don't want. It's such a rich history. Just last year, I was in Beloit, Wisconsin, and I
Yeah,
was visiting with Fairbanks Morris Defense. And Fairbanks Morris Defense, and again, I've been in this business for a long time. I've visited a lot of companies, but you got to really know a company, you got to go and visit with them where they live. And I mean, their entire business, like yours, it started out with farm work. It
yeah.
started out supporting the farms and the businesses. And then just last week, I was in out just outside of Pittsburgh. We were on the upper Ohio River, and I was
Mhm.
with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Waterways Council, and they're replacing 3 locks up there. And again, I've written about it many times, but until you walk it, until you're there, until
Yeah.
you're on top of it, until you visualize what's being done, how it's being done, absolutely blows your mind. You have the utmost respect. So I appreciate that history. So let's kind of bring it to today. Can you give us a by the numbers look at your company? something that gives us a size and scope to the operation using the metrics of your choice.
Yeah, so we today Brennan has grown to a business that annually we do over 300 million in sales. We manage a fleet of over 100 and some million of equipment throughout the United States. At the height of the year, we're around 800 employees. Interestingly, we on any given day will splash nearly 100 commercial divers throughout the United States, really throughout North America. So we're very focused in that area of our business. And in terms of where we operate, we like to say coast to coast to coast, certainly throughout all of the lower 48, and that's both coastally, along the coast, but also in the inland areas of the country, and Canada now as well too. We like to say our business is in, above, adjacent, and below the water. That's the marketplace that we operate in. So that gives you a little context around the business. We annually into eight figures of reinvestment into the business. So we're bullish on building a strong balance sheet and a strong business. So
That's awesome. And again, I love your tagline because when, we have properties in maritime, offshore energy, and subsea. And when someone asks me what I do, I'm like, look, anything that's on, under, above, or around the water is
yeah,
us. And I said, quite frankly, the next thing I want it to do, I want it to be dry.
yeah,
Just to separate that. So, again, you referenced it already, and I appreciate the insights. And, I see that you are diverse by the markets that you serve.
Mhm.
So when you look at the company holistically, can you give a breakdown by percentage of what each sector adds to the bottom line and discuss in detail the portion of your company that you consider to be the bread and butter?
Yeah. We really have five operating groups when you talk about diversity of the organization, and those five operating groups would be our construction, our marine construction group, environmental, underwater services, our cable or power group, and our harbor services or fleeting group. And so those five areas, in terms of what they contributes to, say, the overall profitability or sales of the organization, our environmental and our construction groups are roughly about 30% each. So that, brings you up to, in total about 60%. Those two groups, environmental and, as I mentioned previously, environmental was really born out of our hydraulic dredging exposure. We're very focused on subaqueous cleanup impacted sites throughout the country. And that was really born out of our hydraulic dredge experience. Our marine construction group, that's how we started as a construction company. And so when you ask and you say, well, what is your bread and butter? Or what is your perhaps oldest lines of business? It would really be in that marine construction and dredging aspect of the company. And then, but we continue to evolve in both areas, both in where we do the work and our capabilities to do the work. As one example, we have a whole subgroup within our environmental group that just deals with water treatment and the purification of water, and that plugs into our dredge projects because so often you generate so much water, particularly when you're dealing on these contaminated sites that needs to be ultimately treated. So those two groups are our bread and butter, but then also our underwater services group, that certainly constitutes about 20% of our overall annual sales. And then our cable and power group is say around 15, and then the fleeting business is say in that maybe 5 to 7%, of the business. But that, the fleeting business is something that's also, we've been in that sector and in that industry for 40 plus years. And so that's also a old line and base business of who we are at Brennan.
I hate to put timestamps on anything, but when you're looking ahead, planning ahead, given all that, where do you see the best opportunities for growth in the coming years?
Yeah, so really, in a couple areas, and I'm going to say first off, in terms of a market sector, I think it's just an incredible time to be in business right now, especially if you deal in the built environment, which virtually all of us in the maritime industry and in construction deal with day in and day out. But I think it's such a wonderful and interesting time because we are at the um, precipice of some big changes when it comes to power consumption, power creation in this country, and what it means to the infrastructure of what we've known to be our power generation and transmission throughout the country. We're incredibly bullish on not only new forms of energy coming, into the marketplace. Of course, we do a good deal amount of offshore wind work, which is a new form coming into the marketplace. We do a great deal of hydroelectric work. We're working in nuclear facilities. Our divers go into nuclear facilities, and we work in nuclear facilities, and that piece of the business is growing, as people have read in the news, as private consumers of that business have jumped in. Be it Microsoft or Google looking for additional power resources, but we've seen that part of the business grow substantially, and we're very bullish that as the next 5 years goes on, we're going to see a tremendous amount in variable types of power production go online. And our strategy is to be very closely aligned with that power growth in the country. And then secondly, the transmission of it. We do a great deal of cable lane, subaqueous cable lane. Of course, everybody hears about the offshore stuff, but there's the grid in this country is being rebuilt. It's being rebuilt, and there's new lines even, in addition to being rebuilt, there's new infrastructure going in, and we really closely align ourselves with that infrastructure as well in the power area. So we're very bullish on the power area. The second trend I think that we're very aware of and watching very closely is really a demographic trend. And so what we see, and we've been essentially an acquirer of underwater service type companies. What we see is a lot of the baby boom generation are getting to the end of their working careers. And what we see is that very often when they look to transition to their next generation, it may not be fully formed or even interested in getting into the business. And so one of the maybe strategic or just lucky advantages we have, my brothers and I are all in our 40s. And so we've been a strategic buyer of underwater service businesses that we can plug in and leverage across to grow our own business. So we see that demographic trend continuing at least for the next 10 years as the baby boom generation, gets out of the workplace per se. And so it's been something that really has allowed us to expand our business, not only leverage into different skill sets, but leverage into different geographic markets throughout the country.
There really are so many meaty topics to hit on, and I mean you just nailed on one, and that is the quote unquote next generation,
Mhm.
and where a lot of these companies that were built up but never really got that mass scale are actually going. So let's look at those 18 years that you've been with the company. And really, I'm just looking to dig into what you consider to be the most interesting, the most challenging, the most rewarding projects that you've completed, that I think really, shine on the capabilities of your company.
hmm and I would almost, well, first off, you had mentioned, the length of time that, I've been back in the organization full time because you're right. I think my first job here was sorting bolts when I was, 9 or 10 years old and getting paid by the piece. So being motivated to have high productivity. But, uh, but yeah, so, in terms of full time, it's been a length of time, and I'm always amazed that all your life you go from being one of the younger guys always, and now people start looking at you as an older guy, and it's like, geez, I don't feel that old, but no, it's been a tremendous run, and probably the greatest thing about this business is every one of us gets into this business, construction, the maritime business, because you envision yourself out on the jobs building things and the impact that they have. And when I think of some of the most instrumental work that we've done as an organization, my mind goes to the work that we did on the Fox River, which was a 40-mile stretch of river between Appleton, Wisconsin, leading into Green Bay. It was contaminated with PCBs and was really almost a 15-year effort on our part to dredge, process material, really clean up this river. I think about what an incredible, just the numbers of people and companies that came to, bear their resources to make that happen. And you think about, well, what is the result of that? Today, that fishery is now open in a lot of areas to public consumption. It's changed the economy of the area because now it's become a area asset for travelers to come in, anglers to come in and fish on and harvest, fish that are safe to eat and consume from that area. I also think of projects like we've done on many locks and dams throughout the inland river system, but one in particular is our reconstruction of LaGrange Lock and Dam, which was a big hot button item, say maybe 10 years ago, in terms of the importance of getting that lock structure retrofitted, updated. And what was the result of it? It was a gargantuan effort. I mean, hundreds of people working on this site every day, the lock walls being brought down, new walls put up, new machinery. But the end result of that is this, is that work, because now our inland river system is more efficient, that affects the American farmer in Illinois, the American farmer in Iowa. It makes them more competitive in an increasingly competitive agricultural marketplace globally. And so, you think about the outcome of that work, and it's just incredible, right? And other areas that I think, in terms of the sophistication of our work, we just completed a project last year in upstate Washington at Diablo Dam. We had people that were routinely diving, beyond, below 150 feet and doing construction work, and just all of the talent and the sophistication around being able to do that safely. I really think speaks to the sophistication of our organization and the commitment of our people to do our work safely and efficiently, delivering the best product for our clients. And then, of course, perhaps in our power and cable area, I think of a lot of the offshore work, or even some work we're doing right now in Canada to bring power into the United States, and the sophistication around that work, and how really in the last 5 years we've brought teams of people together to really do that in a high quality and a very safe and efficient manner as well too. So, each group and each aspect of the organization, you just think about, they have their nuances, they have their uniqueness, but they all speak to collectively what is we like to say, marine professionals. Everybody who works at Brennan is a marine professional, and the work and the type of work we do really speaks to their professionalism.
As I said, I was just on a lock and dam last week outside of Pittsburgh. Just last edition of one of our titles, Marine News. I did something with the Corn Belt ports.
Yeah,
Who I was unfamiliar with that organization. I was down in Houston at the Port of the Future conference, and amazing. I'm sitting there
yeah.
listening to a presentation. I love hearing new ideas and new thoughts. But I mean, just really stressing the importance of the rivers,
Mhm.
and the efficiency of the rivers to not just the farmers, to the U.S. economy. I mean, it really sets your mind. And just one more point on, it's very funny what you said about, you never consider yourself the old guy. Well, I started in this business when I was 26,
Yeah,
and so I started out. I was traveling overseas. And there was this really famous group of London-based maritime publications with these older guys running it. And my guys, we called them the old crusties. We're like,
yeah.
those old guys. What are these? No, those old guys. And then I'll never forget. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. It was right before the pandemic. And I'm at a press thing, and it was actually in Greece. And I walk into the room, and I look around at all the people there, and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm the old crusty.
Yeah.
Because
It
every other person in that room looked like they could be my son who just graduated college. So it's humbling, but it's part of the natural progression.
it
So again,
is.
I really appreciate that. So I don't want to be overly repetitive. When I asked you to look at the markets, you kind of discussed some of the mega trends, but you just came off your 100th plus anniversary. I'm sure you and your brothers, you're working on this generational thing. So when you look at the mega trends driving your business today, I guess, how are you investing today to ensure that you're here to celebrate your 200th anniversary?
Yeah, so that's a really great question in terms of how do you invest to create resiliency, to create sustainability, right? And in our business, we like to really talk about three things: people, process, profit. And first off, when you talk about investing in your business, and how are we building for the next 100 years, it begins with how are we building our people, right? What do we do internally to create better people with better skill sets that can go out and deliver safer, higher quality work for our clients? This, first off, looks like endeavors such as our Brennan University that we have here, right? A whole curriculum that we have here internally. It also looks how we engage our union partners or different trade schools or university programs, different training programs, right? So that we can begin to get our brand out there in the marketplace, so to speak, so that people think about coming to Brennan as they're ready to begin their careers. But we feel very strongly, just looking at the demographic trends of this country, where there's less people here over the next, we've got a dip in our population, so to speak, that is going to really manifest itself in the workplace here over the next 4 to 5 years in a big way. And it's not just a dip; it's a dip, and it's sustainment at a lower level. So it's going to become more competitive. The marketplace will be more competitive for people, and so we're very deliberate about how we position ourselves and the value proposition of working at Brennan. The second thing that we're investing in is process. So we're an ISO certified company, but internally we really call it our total quality management system, or the Brennan management system. And we really like to think of it as our own poor man's Six Sigma, if you will, here at Brennan, right? How can we do safety better? How do we create systems that make our work more safe? How can we be more efficient in terms of the delivery of our products and the services that we deliver to our clients? Quality, when we have quality issues, how are we examining those issues and correcting them so that we don't have a repeat of those issues? So we really spend a tremendous amount of money, time, effort in the area of creating, I would say, process infrastructure here within the company to ensure ultimately, and this is the way we talk about that, if you do people really well, you put great people in great systems and give them the tools they need to do their work, profit is just, that will follow. Not always, not maybe every year to your expectations, but generally more times than not, that profit will follow. In addition, we have other strategies too. I talked about the market alignment in the area of power. We're very bullish as well too about creating more addressable market in terms of geography and skill sets. So that all fits into the area of profit as well too. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as we put people, process, profit together, and the company generates the returns that we envision, I think the last step of this is, how do you build the balance sheet? How do you build the balance sheet so that you can reinvest in the business? You build the balance sheet so that it supports what the shareholders' expectations are of the organization. And you build the balance sheet so that you're in position to grow the company, not just maybe through reinvestment in heavy assets or people, but also through acquisitions or other growth endeavors. So those are the types of things, as we think about the next 100 years, that we're really focused on as a leadership and a family who leads this business.
Okay, that's awesome, Matt. And again, I appreciate your thoughtful answers. And I think that Brennan University and just the Brennan management system, that's another interview for another day, because that, the whole training and education of whatever you do is just so critical. So I appreciate your time. I just had one more question. Every CEO, every company in every industry has their challenges. What do you count as your greatest challenges to running a safe, efficient, and profitable company today?
Mhm. Um, so in thinking about this, right, and really in leading and managing a business, I really break this question down into two areas. There's the externalities, if you will, and the internalities. If I could do a play on words there. And when it comes to the externalities, these are very often things that we don't control, like a pandemic, right? Or like inflation coming out of a pandemic, or a change in government policy and what the effects of that are in our real economy. And so, as a leader of all businesses, whether it's a marine business, a construction business, or you're in the grocery business, we're all dealing with these externalities. And by and large, you don't have control of those externalities. However, those externalities impact every one of us because they impact the real economy in very real ways. And I always say, between a pandemic, inflation, some of the government policy changes and whipsawing over the last 5 years, you could almost write a book about the last 5 years in terms of managing and leading through externalities, right? It's just, I hope one day we look back and we're all just going to chuckle about this time, this 5 year period, but we'll see, years down the road here. But those are the externalities. And the best thing that we can do as leaders of an organization is focus on the internalities, which make us better as an organization and better or more adaptive to dealing with these externalities. And so when you talk about how do we be, or how are we a safer business, a higher quality business, a more efficient business, and a more profitable business, I would really say, we can control how we perform and how we live out every day the safe work that we do. Safe work is a commitment that we're not going to do anything but safe work. We're not going to put anybody in a position that would harm them in a way that at night they're not going to go home in the way they came to work. That's a fundamental core tenet. And we can control that as an organization, right? We can control the systems we put in place to have higher levels of efficiency, higher levels of quality. We can control that and focus on that. And ultimately, if you do safety, quality, efficiency better, and you focus on it internally, it really makes you more adept and adaptive in the marketplace to go after new work, to go after work in maybe a more competitive way because you're more efficient. You can deliver things better. And ultimately, as you attack the marketplace and deal with those externalities that you don't control, profitability, if you do it in the right way, in a way that is systematic, profitability will follow. So I think, really to sum that up is that we don't control the externalities. We don't control what happens outside these four walls, so to speak, but we very much control what is on the inside of these four walls, who we are as an organization, how we deliver our product. And, the better that we are, the sharper we are as an organization, the better we're going to compete in the marketplace. And so I would say that's maybe the gist of being a leader or really the focus, certainly the focus of the Brennan organization is, how are we better internally so that we can be, more adaptive and adaptive externally.
Okay. Well, Matt, it was a pleasure to meet you earlier this summer at the WIDA WADCon event in San Diego. Amazing. And I genuinely appreciate your time. You've really given me a nice inside glimpse of Brennan, and I look forward to talking to you and your team again.
Oh, Greg, thank you. It's been a true pleasure to get to know you and also just appreciate everything you did for the Western Dredging Association. It was your CEO panel and the interviews, from that was really a highlight, mentioned numerous times. So it was, we were very fortunate to have you there and would love to, in the next number of months, talk to you about our next event in Montreal next summer.
Thank you for listening to Maritime Matters. If you would like to be featured on a future Maritime Matters podcast, visit www.marinelink.com or email maritimematters@marinelink.com.